Kirkelos, Councillor Rob Foster, Councillor Lynn Timmers, Councillor Tony Brunet, and to my far right we have our Economic Development Officer, Paul Deaney. In the back, we have on the senior management team table, we have Carrie Beattie, our Senior Communications Advisor. We have Angela Safani, our Director of Finance and Administration. We have Greg Hudson, our Fire Chief. Dave Graham, our Director of Public Works. And Shannon McKay, our Acting Director of Community Services. And way up in the far corner, we have Matt with IT, who's here to save the day if we need him. So, are there any declarations of interest tonight? Seeing none. The confirmation of agenda, do any members have any changes in the order of business detailed in the agenda tonight? Seeing none. Tonight we have two delegations. Our first delegation this evening, we have David Anyet Jeffries and Terry Dinallo from Guardians Capital Advisors LP to provide a presentation and economic update. David and Terry, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you for the invite. We put a package together in front of you, and obviously it's going to be on the screens in a second. The first number of slides are talk about Guardian's history, and Guardian's been in business since 1962, so over 50 years of experience in asset management business. It is on, yes, just a little closer. David, just by way of introduction, David joined Guardian about a year ago. He joined us from Gluskin Sheff, where he was a senior economist working closely with David Rosenberg, and more previous to that was with RBC as an economist as well. So I would draw your attention to the economic outlook, which starts, I believe, on page 8. And with that, I'll pass it over to David.
They're just fixing the screens. Okay, so we've got a lot of a fairly short time, so I have a nice sort of concise overview of the macro, and we'll work down to sort of a more, like start broad, work narrow. First off, the Canadian economy as a whole actually reached the G7 last year, grew at a 3% rate, which actually was surprising for a lot of forecasters, a lot of people in the macro markets, and especially given the fact that we didn't see the energy sector come back online. But again, we had strong growth last year, and the expectation is that in the current year, we will continue to see growth, just not at that same rate. We're seeing economies, advanced economies globally are actually in this phase of normalizing in terms of their growth rate. So they're approaching more we consider the potential growth rate, so the speed limit at which an economy can grow, because only for so long can you grow at an above potential rate. We're in this point where we're sort of going towards where technology and population growth, we're merging into this area. And within Canada, obviously there's huge differences across provinces. It is a diverse country, but one of the things that we saw last year was it was the West that led the rest. Ontario obviously is the most populous, most economically important province, and we find ourselves obviously keeping pace with the national average, just strictly because of our weight. But the expectation again is across provinces that you're seeing this normalization or this return to more potential growth rates across the provinces. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just more of an indication of where we are in this economic cycle. It is a very mature cycle, and at this point, you know, you start coming closer to these speed limits at which an economy can grow. But again, this is one of the benefits. So we're seeing there is still growth, broad-based growth across the country right now. And against talking about speed limits, one of the big things is capacity pressures that we're seeing in the economy. So the number one is that the Bank of Canada focuses on is the unemployment rate. It is sort of a quick and dirty measure of number of people who want jobs and can't find them. And right now we're pressing at our lowest levels. Basically, last month we actually hit the lowest level since 1976 in terms of how the data is kept. And it's just emphasizing the fact that capacity pressures are starting to become far more prevalent. So companies that want to expand, there's difficulties with labor. And typically what happens in this scenario, and the reason why the Bank of Canada pays attention to that, is because one of the ways that people find other employees is wages start to go up. So recruiting requires more wages. And inflation, which is broad-based price pressures in the economy, are starting to see those inflationary pressures start to rise again. Now, what this means is at this point in the cycle, even with growth starting to moderate from high rates, with capacity pressures being reached and with inflation starting to drift higher, it means that policymakers, the Bank of Canada, are just going to start raising interest rates. And this is actually a phenomenon that we're starting to see globally as well among advanced economies. But when talking about what policymakers are going to do, you have to also realize that these are base case projections. There are a lot of risks on the horizon, and particularly as it relates to Ontario. And the main reason is because of the U.S. is adjusting how it conducts its trade policy. So right now the expectation is that NAFTA will continue to remain in place, but at the same point, there is a non-zero risk that it will get torn up. And when that matters to Canada as a whole, because we are a small open economy and very much dependent on the US for trade, but it's extremely important for Ontario, who is even more levered than the country as a whole. So this chart lays out trade dependency. So it's trade to the rest of the world and to the US, and it looks at Canada as a whole and Ontario in particular. And the vast majority of that trade across Canada with the US is focused in Ontario. So to the extent that we have this trade uncertainty on the horizon, that has implications in terms of investment spending in Ontario and in Canada. And when you have uncertainty, that gives policymakers cause to pause. The other big uncertainty is related to Canadian households and household debt. The big concern is that when you're raising interest rates, that means that the cost of carrying debt goes up. And the concern is, with elevated levels of household debt, what is the capacity for which that they can actually manage this? The ratio that always gets a lot of press attention is this household debt to income ratio, which is at a record high, but that doesn't necessarily give you a good indication on the capacity for homeowners to actually manage debt. So if you look at something like the debt to asset ratio, when they take on debt, what's happening in Canada is it's a situation they're doing so it's mainly mortgages. And when you have that asset on the balance sheet as well, matching that liability, in terms of net wealth, it's actually a positive. And what you see in the US, the big concern was there was this extraction of the home equity, and you saw a deterioration of their balance sheets ahead of the actual crash of the US housing market. So people like to do the comparison between the US circa 2006 and 7 versus Canada now. But one of the big differences, obviously, other than the debt picture there, which I sort of just went over, is the idea that Canadian homeowners and Canadian financial institutions are far more conservative. There's a lot more skin in the game. Like, on average, Canadian homeowners own 75% of their real estate. So only 25% is actually leveraged. In the US, like at a peak, it was around 65%. And you can see that it actually started declining ahead of the financial crisis, ahead of the recession. Because again, this is this equity extraction. And that's when it starts to be concerning, is that when home prices, this is the cushion to a fall in home prices. The more equity you have, the less pressure it puts in the financial system. Like, it impacts your wealth, obviously, if your home price falls, but in terms of banks and the ability to lend, there's a cushion there. And the important thing talking about the Canadian housing market, if we're looking at the US in 2006, 2007, the housing bubble there was broad-based. It was in Reno, Nevada. It was in Carson City, Nevada. It was in Florida as well. It wasn't just in main cities. Canada's housing market is distinctly different in the fact that, to the point that there is a bubble that's forming or aggressive move in home prices, it's literally situated in just 2 cities and their surrounding areas. Now, and this again it's Vancouver and Toronto, and you have Hamilton, Oakville, Milton, Victoria, and Guelph. It's the adjacent areas where the urban sprawl starts to move out, where people can still access the core, like the downtown core of these cities, and it prices because supply is limited, demand is growing. Talking about just strictly the fundamentals, Ontario and Vancouver, or Toronto and Vancouver have the largest population growth and the largest population growth in Canada and the largest population growth in the G20 of educated immigrants. So you're getting these flows of wealthy, competent people moving into the areas where there is just not a lot of supply for homes, and that's what's one of the main factors that's pushing prices up. This isn't a situation like the US where people were just flipping homes, borrowing with no equity, and then just trying to resell homes. And talking about interest rates as well, the focus is on the housing market, but Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz and as well policymakers in general say that interest rates are kind of a blunt instrument to try and calm down a housing market. Because you raise interest rates, yes, it impacts homeowners and mortgage borrowers, but it also impacts corporate lending. Like it's all felt across the entire spectrum of the Canadian economy. However, if you do targeted regulation, which is what we've seen in Vancouver and Toronto, where the governments have put forth ideas of restricting foreign home ownership, additional taxes on foreign home ownership, taxes on vacancies that are trying to sort of to manage sort of those demand and supply imbalances. And we're seeing in terms of home sales and home sales prices, we're coming off these peaks as a result of these plans. But also putting home prices in context and talking about Vancouver and Toronto, we're not actually that out of whack or anywhere close to on an international stage. It looks weird from a Canada perspective, and especially if you compare, this is looking at household price to income, house price to income ratios. And it's elevated in Toronto and Vancouver, a little less so in Montreal. But if you look at it on comparison with other large international cities, big capital cities in the world, we're barely even noticeable in terms of Toronto. And there's a lot of reason for this. Like again, it's a supply and demand. People want to live in these large cities. The supply of available land to which to build is not there, and that pushes upward pressure on home prices. But again, we're nowhere near other areas of the world. Like it's actually not that scary a situation. So what we're seeing now is the situation is the Canadian economy is strong enough to start standing on its own. We no longer warrant emergency levels of interest rates. We're reaching capacity pressures. We're seeing inflation rates start to tick up. And so the expectation is we're going to continue to see interest rates rise, policy interest rates rise. And that means market interest rates are going to rise as well. But this isn't going to be some sort of abrupt move. Like if you look at this chart, looking around the period in 2006, 2007, the Bank of Canada moved aggressively raising interest rates. This go around, they're going to be moving higher, but they're not going to be going to those previous levels. And it's going to be a very gradual and drawn out process because there is no desire to actually upset to dump the punch bowl and bring this, the party of economic growth to an end. And that actually has a significant impact in terms of the Canadian dollar. So traditionally, since 2007 in particular, the Canadian dollar was viewed as like a petrocurrency, which meant that it moved in tandem with the price of oil. And what we've seen after the oil price crash, this was very, very prevalent, but something that we've seen over the last 18 months is that this relationship is actually broken down. So the Canadian dollar is no longer moving in response to the oil price, it's moving in response to interest rates, and interest rate differentials in particular with the US. So what this means is going forward, yes, oil prices are rising, but because we're seeing the likelihood that the Bank of Canada is going to raise rates slower than the US, that means that that rate differential is going to increase, and that creates the opportunity for further downward pressure on the Canadian dollar. And with that, I will leave. Again, you just wanted a brief overview, so there's a very brief overview, and I'll open up to questions if there are any.
Very good. Yeah. Open the floor to questions. Councillor.
Thank you very much. A very good presentation. I always love seeing stats and trying to figure out, and I'm kind of glad you put a few things into focus. I've always been fascinated with unemployment rates, and I'm sometimes wondering if it's really telling the story. And this, and I can state with this with my own family and with my children, I've noticed that there's lots of part-time jobs that people can get into, but those full-time benefits-oriented types of jobs are the ones that just don't seem to be there or are having difficulty. So when you're doing analysis like this, like, do you ever dig into that a little bit further?
Absolutely. So talking about full-time, part-time split, because obviously from a policymaker standpoint, an economic standpoint, you would rather have full-time positions with guaranteed wages, and like that is a much better, more beneficial situation because consumers in that scenario are more likely to buy stuff and businesses are more likely to invest as a result of the people buying stuff if they have sort of that foresight where their next paycheck's going to be coming from. And so what has actually been the case, because with the employment data, it's volatile on a month-to-month basis, we've had extremely solid job growth in Canada over the last 18 months in particular, and it has been overwhelmingly skewed in the full-time range. You know, you can take whatever you will in terms of the quality of the data, but to paraphrase Winston Churchill, it's better than anything else we have in terms of this. So from that standpoint, and we're seeing, again, this is a Canada-wide basis, but also an Ontario phenomenon because Ontario drives the vast majority of the job market. But the skew has been towards full-time. Now, talking to the issue of benefits, that is something that is shifting. Like defined benefit pensions basically don't exist anymore. Even finding a job where a DC defined contribution pension exists is not necessarily something that exists anymore. But the concern is when you are reaching these capacity pressures, if people want to be able to actually go and get employees, you have to start offering them something, you know, and whether or not it's higher wages or the flexibility, like increasing flexibility. And there's a lot of studies that millennials, Generation X individuals cherish things other than the paycheck. They want to have that flexibility, the ability to be home with their kids, the ability to work from home, you know, seeing those benefits and things. It's a different, more dynamic job market than it was, you know, 20 years ago, where you could, out of high school, get a nice factory job with full benefits and pension. You know, those just don't really exist anymore due to, you know, competitive pressures in business.
Madam Mayor?
Thank you very much, David. It is a very good report and certainly very thought-provoking. However, the reality is that for us, for this corporation, we have to be in a position to interpret from an economic perspective for our citizens how we're going to manage things into the future. So I was looking at some other information that actually looked at that period of time from 1945 to 1960 and from the mid-60s until the decline, that really serious decline. And the whole business of offshore work now, all the jobs that have gone out of both countries in North America, and where that's leaving people, it really is quite a dilemma, even in the best of circumstances, even in the best of what you've offered us here. And this is a little rosier than when I first looked at it. I thought it was better than I expected that it was going to be. So when you're advising people, when you're advising corporations, what is it that you're telling them now about how we can reset our local economies? It's important to us because eventually we have to make decisions about what the tax levy is going to be.
Absolutely.
And of course, there's a lot of factors that come into that. But I mean, I'm curious to know whether, I know it's very, you know, it's probably a big deal getting this information together, but when it comes right down to it, what kind of analysis are you able to present to your clients so that they can start making good policy decisions?
Well, just to clarify one thing, work at the investment side. I'm an economist and strategist and portfolio manager, so I'm not advising corporations or governments on. I have done that in previous roles, specifically with the Royal Bank of Canada, but that's not something I do now. But in terms of that forward-looking perspective and how to sort of manage an economy, it really does come down to the stuff about outsourcing and offshoring of jobs. That is definitely a phenomenon that basically has peaked, and we're actually seeing a reversal of that in terms of onshoring, especially in Canada and the US. The bigger aspect in terms of impacting job markets is technology more than anything else. A lot of jobs are just becoming increasingly automated. And by investing in that capital, businesses are able to sort of move away from employees and the added costs of them. And, you go to a grocery store now, there's no longer cashiers at some places. It's, the check yourself out. And those are increasingly coming to a scenario. So what we're seeing in terms of setting up economies and towards rebalancing and dealing with the economic changes is there's this emphasis on sort of skills development and trying to find a niche area. So if you look at Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, that was an industry town. It was a manufacturing town for a long while, and they're making a concerted effort. They're investing money to build sort of themselves into a tech hub. And that means a lot of subsidizing specific industries, targeting how your tax policy, especially in terms of property taxes and things along those lines, to create an opportunity or create an incentive for people to move there and create a different type of jobs. So we may be losing, some areas, like manufacturing in particular, is something that's been wiped out. Not wiped out, but greatly impacted by increases in technology. And we've seen that since about 2000 when employment peaked in manufacturing. It's been on a steep decline since. But it's a shift in terms of how the economy is structured. So we're moving in towards more of a service-oriented economy and trying to develop coding and put more emphasis on sort of different skill sets than previously are what mattered. So from a policy standpoint, it really comes down to trying to find ways to create incentive for people to innovate and be able to quickly adapt to those potential. It is a very difficult thing to do, and it's a very difficult thing to get off the ground, but it is that's sort of the direction, is to figure out where the economy is going. What are the opportunities that are going to be playing out based on demographic, based on technological innovation, and try and sort of ride a wave as best as possible. I don't know specifically how to answer your question.
Well, I think you've done a pretty good job. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to know whether you, in that scenario, would you advise that GDP will cap? Will it actually cap in that scenario? Because there's so many variables that are so changeable. We don't have the longevity of that long stream, that long period from 45 to 60, where everything was just, on pretty much it was very stable.
Yes.
The economy was very, very stable. So in this variable economy where jobs are not consistent and there is a lot of change and a lot of global impact, does the GDP tank, or does it just cap and then we're just at that ceiling and there isn't much that we can do to motivate it beyond that? Is that the risk?
Well, that's always a risk that an economy would stagnate, but it's not necessarily what's playing out. And actually what we're seeing, the trend is always, if we're talking about GDP, like the actual output in investment in an economy, that typically rises. It always rises over time because the growth rate is based on technological innovation and population growth. As long as we have some population growth, as meager as it may be, and one of the big differences between 1945 to 1960 and the period now is that was the baby boom. Mm-hmm. And you had just a giant sort of uptick in population there. And that alone could spur growth, as well as more women entering the labor force. That kind of stuff is something that can trigger growth. But innovation is constant. By pretty much every standard, the quality of life in Canada in particular is better than it's been at any point previously. Employment is strong because it's just different types of employment. It isn't necessarily more variable and vicarious. It's just different areas. Because if you look back at going back into history, at the turn of 1900s, I think it was 40% of Canadian economy or employment was in agriculture. Mm-hmm. It's now 3%, if that. Right? So it's just economies adapt and evolve. And from a policy standpoint, it's making sure that you don't do anything to get in the way of that innovation and evolution. Because you see economies like Venezuela in particular, a lot of ones in sub-Saharan Africa, is the policymakers have made terrible decisions. There's a lot of corruption in there, and they actually inhibit growth.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So more immigration and more babies.
That's what we need.
Yes,
that's what we need.
There's a reason why there's a concerted effort, especially by the Canadian government, to try and recruit skilled immigrants into the country. Because especially with the baby boom generation entering the retirement years, someone needs to help support them. And you need taxpayers, and you want a growing tax base. So yes, population growth by any means necessary, and typically increasingly so, that's tilting towards immigration.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you, gentlemen. We're in interesting times, and in your business, I don't envy where you are with what's going on politically, both on the U.S. side and right here in our province, with what's going to happen over the next 6 months with the Ontario election and then the midterms down in the U.S. We could be sitting here next year at this time looking at a completely different picture, possibly. But it is encouraging to see, many of these numbers, although, GDP is looking like it's softening a little bit. I think we had obviously a very strong year last year. And, we're kind of coming back to the rest of the group this year and possibly next year, and understand that these are forecasts, and all those other things in the mix could change things. But thank you for your time tonight and sharing this with us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next delegation, we have Caroline McDonald from Spark Lincoln.
Hello.
Hello, Caroline.
Hi.
Who will provide us an update on Spark Niagara's evolution.
Yes.
So when you're ready, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me here. Thanks. I think I'm good. Okay, perfect. No, it's good. It's good. It's good. Okay, so while we're getting the tech organized, thank you so much for having me. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background information before I start talking about Spark Lincoln. So our head office is Spark Niagara Innovation Education Center, which is located in Niagara Falls. That was our very first partnership. Founded by the Chief Information Officer with the District School Board of Niagara, Dino Miele. The idea of Spark was born out of the Innovation and Education Hub within the District School Board of Niagara, which was founded about 4 years ago, which is specifically an education technology incubator for new and emerging startup companies. So it's the only incubator that's located in Ontario within a K-12 facility. So it's very distinctive in that sense, because it gives the startup companies, the entrepreneurs, the ability to have this very streamlined approach and opportunity to get direct feedback and collect data from their customers or their potential clients, which are the students as well as the educators. So it's very distinctive in that sense. So born out of that idea was Spark. And again, it was founded by Dino. And we wanted to go beyond education technology, so beyond the K-12 sector, to young adults, to 40 to 50-year-olds, to beyond that, to seniors. And so there is a distinct need in this region, especially and a vast amount of talent that we want to try to retain. And there's many ways that we can do this, and Spark was born out of that mission or that want. So Spark Lincoln, out of Spark Niagara, and this is our second municipal partnership. And so we're really excited about it. We're actually launching officially on Monday. So really the idea is that we're committed to creating opportunities across sectors, both in technology as well as education. So we have 1,000 square feet that we've partnered with the town of Lincoln. It's fully renovated, and our team is focusing on supporting entrepreneurship, driving economic development, and encouraging youth retention and attraction to the region and to the municipality specifically. So why Niagara? There's many reasons why Niagara. Not only is it a tourism destination that we want to leverage on, it's also a growing region, both within the wine industry, agricultural industry, manufacturing industry. diversification into a very innovative ecosystem. Spark has started to form many partnerships in which we can start to leverage the opportunity to get more innovative in various areas, whether that's agritech, health tech, cybersecurity, and even try to pursue more education technology opportunities. We're in a great position to be within the Forward Trade Zone designation and that cross-border corridor that we can build as well. Not only that, but we're in a very close proximity to Toronto, GTA, as well as cross-border to the US. So a lot of our sectors are what I discussed previously was ed tech, but we're also working with many open big data, healthcare, health tech. A lot of people have heard of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is just a smaller component of something larger called blockchain, mobile apps, as well as fintech. And a lot of our services include technology camps for youth, technology camps for seniors, workshops for professional development, whether that's for educators or other sectors, as well as a real focus on an entrepreneurial mindset. So Spark operates sort of multi-capacity. So the space that we have in Lincoln is going to be a co-working space, an incubator for helping and providing services to new and emerging startup companies and young entrepreneurs, as well as developers, creative professionals, and anyone who is starting their own business up and needs the support and the services to be able to go through those various stages of business. But in addition to that, we also are going to be doing a lot of work with youth and building that idea of the entrepreneurial mindset from a young age and focusing on those digital 21st century skills that are going to be so important for our future workforce. So currently, Spark Niagara, the location in Niagara Falls, we work with about 14 startup portfolio companies in various multi-sector industries, and I just wanted to give an example of some of those. So we work with a company called Bicep. They're a healthcare company. One of his ideas and prototypes is, his background is actually in chiropractic care, but he's developed a prototype for something that would connect to a wheelchair that would help with the process of rehabilitation. So normally you would have 2 kinesiologists that would be working with any client. This would help lower the necessity for additional kinesiologists to be part of that process of rehabilitation because of this prototype that attaches to a wheelchair. And he's done many studies where he's actually collected data that the rehabilitation process it lessens in time according to what he's providing for these clients of his. Hippo Video is a educational software platform. Workbay.net, they're a company that has developed a job and employment platform. So this is just a few of the companies that we're working with. Corporate sponsors, we've been able to, in the short time that we've been here, develop many corporate sponsors, including Microsoft, the Niagara Regional Broadband Network. We have formed a partnership with Amazon Web Services, which is going to be giving an amazing opportunity to startup companies that are affiliated with Spark that will provide them the opportunity to grow their business through the cloud network. Government partners, educational partners. There's a few others that we've recently added to this, but a lot of our educational partners are very important to our network and how we're proceeding through the region. So Niagara College, District School Board of Niagara, Niagara University in Buffalo, BioLink at Brock University. As recently as last week, we secured a partnership with Stratford University, which is a university located in Fairfax, Virginia. Spark Niagara is officially now going to be the first Canadian location to be able to offer online virtual certificate programs in cybersecurity, ethical hacking, blockchain, and cloud computing, and that's going to be as of September 2018. A couple of other innovative projects that we're working on right now. Amazon Web Services, which I mentioned briefly before, giving our portfolio companies or any companies affiliated with Spark the opportunity to grow their business on the cloud, the Amazon Web Cloud, and through a tiered system based on their current level of revenue and employees, they can receive a certain amount of promotional credits to be able to start this process of being on the cloud. Next week, we have our Connect conference, which is the largest education technology conference in Canada, where over 2,000 educators, administrators, and IT specialists convene. It's a very exciting conference, actually, so anyone who is interested in attending that, please feel free to talk to me about that. And one other thing that we're really excited about, large project-based, is with the HP Hewlett-Packard Learning Studio. This is part of the Reinvent the Classroom initiative, where we focus on youth and giving them the experience of project-based experiential learning based on a design thinking framework. And the design thinking framework really focuses on solving social and community challenges through a self-paced, self-directed student program. And that is all that I have. But if you have any questions, please.
I'm sure we do. I'm sure we do. So I'll open the floor to questions. Go ahead, Councillor.
First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. My daytime job, I'm in information technology as well, and unfortunately, Councillor Thompson is here this evening. He's very much into the wireless side of things, and I work within the healthcare field doing things. So ultimately, out of what you're doing with this program and stuff like that, like what really are you trying to do with the students that you get involved with this? Like, is one of the things I find today is I'm trying to hire people.
Yep.
There's either one of two things. They want to go and program games, which of course I'm not interested in at all. Or the other thing is that they just have differing views on programming languages, etc. So I'm just curious, like how do you see this really working for students as they come through this?
Yeah, so there's a lot of opportunity. You mentioned the idea of different programming languages, and you're right. There's multiple programming languages out there, some more relevant than the next. We have the luxury of working with many different startup companies that work in all areas of IT and development. So we work with a company called Code Niagara, who's a startup company based in Niagara, and they focus on Python and that language. We also work with virtual reality companies who look at game development. We have another company that we work with who focus on app development, so whether that's through the MIT App Inventor or whether that's through Apple's Swift Playground. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's plenty of opportunity out there, and we want to meet the needs of all youth and what they're interested in. The reality is that as we get farther into the 21st century, more jobs are opening up and more jobs require the ability to be technical, to be IT, to be educated in a developer field. So what we want to do is just meet youth where the needs are in order to be able to help better prepare them for the future workforce and get them skilled in those 21st century digital technology skills. So a lot of the ways that we're going to be doing that is through our workshops, through our camps, partnering with our different startup companies, partnering with other organizations that we're collaborating with. And yeah, internships. Brock University is one of our largest partners, specifically BioLink and the Goodman School of Business. So the ability to be able to offer co-ops and internship opportunities we have a lot of opportunity to be able to do that, and we're currently working on trying to get to that place. Yeah.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's all very exciting.
It is.
It's great to have it in our town, absolutely. I think I can well imagine there'll be a line up at the door every day, and that'll be a good thing.
I hope so.
This is, it's difficult to determine how this fits into a regular curriculum. If you are a discipline-based person, and so you're going to university to achieve a certain level of education, is there enough opportunity or enough space being created in those programs? Let's just look at a basic BA. Is there enough space in those programs being created so that those skills become part of that mainstream learning? Or is this an add-on? And is it lifelong add-on?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I would say currently, no, there's not. There's some space and there's some opportunity within current programs that are being offered at Brock University and Niagara College. However, I think as time goes on, there will be. One of the initiatives that we're taking part in right now is a partnership with that Stratford University. One of the partners that came with Spark to Virginia last week to meet with this university was Brock. So there is some long-term goals in place that are going to be able to offer these types of programs in cybersecurity and ethical hacking and cloud computing and blockchain, and the list goes on as far as IT and development and technology goes. It's just a lengthy process. So anytime you're dealing with like public sector educational institutions, things are not happening overnight. So what we can do as Spark and the programs and the opportunities that we're able to offer through our partnerships and through our internal skill set and offerings is we can start supplementing these programs with things. Because ultimately that's the future, that's where things are going. In a few years, there's not really going to be many jobs out there that don't require at least the fundamentals of IT development and some technology skills to be required. So we need to start preparing for that. And I think that's where Spark can fit in really nicely, as far as we may not be changing overnight, but we can help support the colleges and the universities and help to drive that mindset shift and that educational component by supplementing it with our programs.
And Mr. Chairman, more specifically, is mathematics likely to be a subject that will suffer as a result of this displacement?
No, I don't think so, not at all. I think that computing, especially things like coding, it fits, there's a synergy there with mathematics. The problem solving, the computational thinking, the ability to debug a situation and go back and resolve it and persevere, those are all skills that are required of kids and of youth. And I think computational skills, coding, digital literacy, those are only going to serve to support the skills that kids are learning and students are learning, and mathematics is only going to be enhanced because of that.
And Mr. Chairman, I also wonder about the humanities and literature. Where do you see that going?
Well, that's always going to be there. I think that cross-curriculum wise, things like problem solving, things like literacy is only going to be crossed over into things like digital literacy. So nothing is going to be displaced. I don't see anything being displaced. I see things being enhanced with the ability to be able to cross-curricular all subjects and be able to have it work together as a viable ecosystem. It's only going to enhance our education system.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me.
Not done yet.
Okay,
Hang on, just hang on.
bring it on.
So Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Thank you for coming in tonight. I've been very interested in this whole Spark incubator, and I think I'm trying to get my head around what a day there looks like. Is this an open door? People can just come in?
Yeah,
Or they
absolutely.
have to be signed up for courses and programs? Or they're going to be in there?
Yeah, I love the idea
Is
of an
that-
open door policy.
Is that how it
Yeah,
will work?
absolutely. And I mean, like I said before at the beginning of the presentation, it's very multi-capacity. So yes, it's for young entrepreneurs. So being able to come after school and work on ideas and be supported, and the idea of the entrepreneurial mindset and being able to come up with an idea and take that idea and sort of run with it. We're there to support them. It's also sort of a hot desk area. So emerging companies who are even in the ideation stage of business, they can come and they can get support through our business services, through our entrepreneur in residence, through our educators. We're also going to be running camps throughout the summer, 7, maybe 8 weeks of camps. Combination of internal skills on our staff, as well as some of the startups that we're working with. We're developing the curriculums to be able to offer different topics of digital technology camps for youth ages 10 to 14, and those are going to be running throughout the summer at all of our locations. So yeah, I mean, in answer to your question, the idea of it being an open door policy and a very community-based hub is definitely something that we're trying to drive for sure.
Okay, thank you. I just have one other question. About a year and a half ago, I started a computer lab in the seniors building on Queen Street.
Okay.
It's called Queen Manor.
Okay.
I have a tutor who's working free of her, she's a volunteer that I did this with, and through a partnership with Niagara Regional Housing. So we have about 16 senior students once a week.
Yep.
And we've been trying to connect them with a tutor, like a youth, like partner.
Almost like a reverse mentor
Exactly,
type program?
reverse mentoring, and we just haven't been successful. And I'm just wondering if somehow we can partner through this Spark
100%.
incubator, if we can somehow, the seniors need to stay on site, but it's very close, like it's one street between them, so.
It's interesting that you said that. That's one of the ideas that we were throwing around in our initial meetings. I have 2 of our Spark staff are already working on building connections with the local senior facilities to be able to do almost like a traveling sort of tech development for seniors.
That's
So,
great.
100%.
That's great. No,
that's
I'm
in
really
the
excited
plans.
to hear
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
I think there's definitely a need and there's an interest, and I think there's a lot of seniors in the community that would be really interested in learning.
I agree. And 2 of the biggest things that we sort of decided based on our talks with the town and sort of filling the gaps in the town with our hub would be youth and seniors, and then also bringing those together, like a reverse mentorship type program. And there is a need for that.
Absolutely. No, I'm
definitely
really
a
excited to
focus.
hear
Yeah.
that. So, yeah, I look forward to that.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is the way it's going to go. I'm going to go to Councillor Brunet, and then I have a few questions, and I'm going to turn it over to CAO, and then we're going to go over to our EDO for some comments, so sit tight.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pretty cool now because my comment was similar to what Councillor Timmins just asked. You had done a great job, Carolyn, talking about the industry sectors in terms of healthcare and blockchain, and I wanted you to elaborate on how we could see and how I envision things rolling out with the tech camps and tech for seniors. So you've touched on that, and anyway, look forward to seeing the alterations that you've made up there and how everything will roll out. So thank you for coming tonight.
Absolutely. We're very excited about it.
Okay, Caroline, my questions are, you talked about portfolio companies. I'm wondering if you're working with portfolio companies or approaching companies within Lincoln or the
absolutely.
surrounding area?
So one of the things that we have met with the Vineland Research Center.
Okay.
They're kind of getting to capacity as far as new companies that they're able to sort of host there. So we discussed with them the opportunity of like them sending their sort of overflow companies, right, or heading them our way. We haven't delved deep yet into contacting or making connections with companies. We have had a couple people come to us that are kind of located within the Lincoln area, but there's more to come on that for sure.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, not knowing, for for something like this, is there a pent-up demand of some kind, or
For the type of hub that
like
we're
just
providing?
Spark Lincoln?
Yeah.
I'm thinking about your first couple of months, and what does that look like? Is there the day you open, is there a beehive of
already open.
activity?
We've been there since February 1st.
Right.
So a lot of time has been spent sort of getting it ready and coming up with planning for camps and workshops. We've already connected with the libraries. We have an official MOU with them on services that we can provide them with, and vice versa. So a lot of it lately has been relationship building. We met with the Employment Help Center yesterday. I can't keep track. Yesterday, the day before, talk about an employment platform with one of our portfolio companies that we're trying to launch as well. So as far as the official launch goes on Monday, we're hoping that we start getting sort of the word out there, promoting the fact that there is a community hub here. Our camps are starting in the summer, so it may be a little bit of a gradual start. But at least, we'll have the launch, the word will be out there, the doors are open, people will start to know about it, and then we'll start getting more traffic and traction.
Cool, okay. And are you working in partnership with Spark Niagara, or are the two kind of independent in their day-to-day?
Just to give you a little bit of more background information. So just because Spark Niagara started first, it doesn't mean that it's independent. So I manage Spark Niagara, but I'm also Spark Lincoln. We have a team of 10 that works between 4 of our locations. So we've got Spark Niagara Falls, we've got Spark Lincoln, we've got the Innovation Education Hub, which is within the DSBN Academy, so that's the one that's within the K-12 facility. And then as of June, we'll have Spark in St. Catharines, which is called Excel North. It's a little bit different in the sense that it's not an incubator, but an accelerator. So there's 4 of those, and they all operate under the same umbrella, almost just as individual municipal satellite sites. So each municipal site is very geared towards filling the gaps that community or that municipality is in need of. And we're trying to align ourselves with your strategic objectives for each of those municipalities. It's not operating independently at all. So anything happening at Spark Lincoln, or any companies that are part of Spark Lincoln, or youth that are part of Spark Lincoln, they have full access to any of the services that we can offer out of Spark Niagara as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to the CAO for some comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I just want to thank Caroline for coming here. I haven't had a chance to chat with Caroline at length, but her enthusiasm is incredibly contagious. And I think, like Dino and David, that were here almost a year ago, this is a phenomenal initiative. And so I did want to take a few moments just to speak a little bit about Spark Lincoln and how it came to be, and I think acknowledge a few people. Definitely starting with Shannon McKay, and I think Shannon, you, Carrie, and I were in that first meeting with Mr. Miele and Robitaille when he came to the table. So thank you to both of you. Carrie for working through this with Paul, who's going to speak after this and who's carried the torch on this, but definitely Shannon for making that initial introduction. And Dino is a great asset we have here in Niagara and incredibly enthusiastic. So I think one of the comments I've said, whether it be the partnership with Brock or whether it be the partnership we have with Spark Lincoln, it comes both from a staff and a council willingness to put ourselves out there to be open to opportunities like this, and I think this will be a phenomenal opportunity for our community. I think sometimes we look at buzzwords like innovation hubs. To me, that's really a social community and an ability to bring people together on a specific topic, and it's innovation, and I think those will be excellent things. Without taking away too much of what's going to be happening on Monday, I think the other interesting piece, or the other exciting piece, is kind of the co-location and the sharing of spaces that you're doing with the Beamsville Lions in that particular site. And so really integrating some of our more seasoned and experienced individuals in the community with youth so that both can learn and I think both can engage and we can improve, I think, some of that tech literacy for our seniors communities and have kind of old and young working together. So I think a great opportunity, I think, Caroline, for your enthusiasm and your help in moving this forward. And I think this will be a great opportunity for economic development, entrepreneurship, youth retention, and a whole bunch of other things. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I'm gonna pass it over to Mr. Deaney and maybe some comments on how he sees this connecting with our economic development strategy.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and just want to echo the CAO's comments and thank Caroline for being here this evening. You know, one of the very first meetings that we did have with Dino and Dave was really to talk about how wonderful an opportunity this is to bring an organization like this into our community, to really attract some opportunities for investment and really educate both you know, youth and experienced individuals in our community on the tech side of things. You know, we did have a meeting with Dino just to talk about, Chair, your question about some of our existing businesses working with Spark Lincoln. We did have a meeting with Extreme Technologies to figure out how one of our most innovative tech companies in our community can really work with this opportunity. So more on that to come as well. But just a few weeks back, Director McKay and I did tour Spark Niagara Falls, or Spark Niagara, the location Niagara Falls, and really did see the fantastic things that they are doing in this location. So, you know, we will look forward, obviously, to the launch on Monday. And as Caroline had mentioned, we did have a meeting yesterday with one of their platforms. Am I allowed to sort of say
Absolutely.
that? Yeah. So Workbay.net, we had a meeting with them and our employment office here in Beamsville on Ontario Street to really identify how the two could work together and perhaps provide the employment office with another platform to help attract jobs and get youth into jobs into our community. So thank you for being here this evening.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I just want to say, I commend the town of Lincoln. You guys are a joy to work with. So we're just really happy to be here, and we're really excited about the future and the opportunities that we have here. So thanks.
And Caroline, right back at you. We, as you can tell by the council's response and the staff response, we are so excited for the start of this this endeavor. And
Great.
you know, I think it does help to differentiate us. And you know, we're looking at some very interesting things coming out of Spark Lincoln over the next few years.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Foster and seconded by Councillor Timmers that the two delegations presented be received. Your pleasure on the motion. That motion is carried. So there are no items of correspondence for this evening's agenda, so we move to reports. CM 18-05, report providing information and update to the Camden Fire Station. Are there any questions from committee members regarding the report? Mary Stin.
Mr. Chairman, I would just say that going back to the decision that council made several months ago, I guess it was, gosh.
December?
Yeah.
Before that?
Well, I think we sent it back for a redo, and there's no question it was the right thing to do. This is a much better project to understand now. The scope of it, I think, has been focused much better. The costs are certainly much improved. And I just want to go to page 34 and ask a question. I'm not sure who to ask the question of. So I'm going to ask the CAO. The accomplishments, when we look at the scope and we look at the variety of items that we removed because they were going to be costing more than we felt that we could afford, I'm trying to determine here if we think that there's going to be any flexibility at all to put anything back in. I guess it's under current period accomplishments. I'm looking at, we now have the drive-through bays. We've got paving along the side and the back of the property. We've got glycol in-floor heating system. Is there anything that wasn't able to be put back in that we're a little bit concerned about? I think Councillor Foster at the time spoke to the issue of us making sure that we didn't cut this off so sharp that we'd be wishing 5 years down the road that we had left an item or two in. And I don't remember what those are, to tell you the truth. I guess they're on the front page, sorry. I'm going to ask the CAO, through you, Mr. Chairman, if he would address this. So I guess it's the hose tower.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the Mayor, she's correct. When we went back and we looked at the funding envelope for this, we identified that there was existing funding and that we had cut a number of things out, and we were actually beneath that newly approved budget. And so I think Council directed us at that particular point in time to go back and to go through a prioritization exercise, and that's something that the Chief went through with Ms. McKay and his operations and what was required. You'll see the 3 that have been reinstituted as part of that particular project, and the Chief can talk to the matrix and the assessment that he did. The one that hasn't been added is the hose tower, and I'll turn it over to either Shannon and or Chief Hudson to speak to how that assessment happened. But 3 of the 4 are back in, and those were deemed the 3 priority ones.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. We looked at the items that were removed from the budget and prioritized them from the standpoint of how they would affect our operation. And they are actually listed on the first page there in order of affect the operation. And, obviously well, not quite. Actually, the drive-through was the most important in terms of our operation. The asphalted areas was also important for ongoing maintenance and being able to get the trucks in without tearing up the driveway every time. And we felt that the hose tower, there are other alternatives to drying the hose that would be perhaps not as convenient as a hose tower, but they certainly would be effective. And when we looked at the cost of the hose tower, it would really affect a wholesale change in the floor plan, which really added the cost significantly. So in terms of a trade-off, we thought, we can live without that one, and we're very happy to see the other ones put back in.
All good?
I think so. I don't really. So you're talking, through you, Mr. Chairman, so the impact would be on the floor plan. And I do recall there being some discussion about one of the alternatives being that the hoses would have to be taken to one of the other fire stations and hung in those towers. Is that correct? Is that the process that would be used? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is one alternative, and we have since found some other alternatives. There are some hose drying racks and equipment that can actually be wall mounted that would serve the job quite well as well. Okay. And so we're actually investigating some of those options as well, and they'd be much more cost effective than actually building a brick hose tower.
Right. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It sounds like the Chief is satisfied.
Any other questions? All good? Okay. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers, seconded by Councillor Foster, that report CM 18-05 regarding the Camden Fire Station project update be received for information. Your pleasure on the motion. Motion is carried. Next report is PW 18-13, report providing information on the U-Link Transit Pilot Quarterly Update. Mr. Graham, if you would take the front chair and for your presentation. And I would like to acknowledge and welcome the guests in the audience tonight. I'm assuming that this may be the report that you're here for, so welcome.
Thank you for having us through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, before I start, I would like to acknowledge the members in the audience have been a really key partner in the U-Link and, have been really a critical partner in giving us feedback all along the way as well as in the planning stages. So Mr. Eric Byers, who's been, kind of my right hand in terms of connection to the heritage community, and Joyce is, she is here. Joyce came in, so Joyce Brown as well, I didn't see her earlier, and the rest of the group as well, who have all been really engaged in providing really key feedback. So thank you for coming out tonight and welcome. So we're going to go through tonight our basically the initial, we're going to go back a little bit of a step, talk about the initial guiding principles just to keep in mind as we're talking about where we go next in the next 4 months, a little bit around ridership metrics, rider feedback themes, proposed route changes, promotion and engagement, and some of the quality improvements we've made in the first 4 months. And then, as we said, really the purpose tonight is to talk about next steps. So the goals, just going back to really the goals of this program, and it was really obviously driven by this council, and the great thing is we've seen a need for it, which is really positive. So it was provide mobility to all members of the community. We wanted to really see opportunity for quality of life, so improved health and community participation rates, and you'll see tonight through some of the rider feedback themes that that's certainly something that we are seeing. Obviously facilitating economic development, so moving our people across Lincoln into our downtown cores, helping out with employment, so kind of piggybacking on Caroline's presentation about the labor force development and being able to move people across the community, and looking also at how do we support the intensification of our community and meeting the demands and expectations of people who are coming from larger centers, and then obviously looking at how we can introduce future GO train service in Lincoln with connection to transit.
And just to sort of give committee a reminder and what we did with our route planning guiding principles when we developed our U-Link pilot program. So again, we want to connect people across Lincoln. One of the main things that we started with was identifying our community assets in Lincoln. So we looked at, social, health, and business assets. Applying service demand criteria, so stops, we want connectivity, frequency, and again, we want it to keep it simple, keep it, but also at the same time ensure that we're following the appropriate principles related to ridership and where we have density. We also looked at our stops. We want to ensure if you're putting a stop somewhere that there's an appropriate walking distance to the destination or destinations that people would like to get to. Linear, a lot of good planning went into our pilot, and we're seeing in terms of we want to have our route linear as possible. So looking at our main spines, King Street, Ontario, that type of methodology, and within overall proximity. And again, speaking with stakeholders to gain an understanding of ridership needs in Lincoln. So ridership metrics. So we're pretty excited bring these results forward. We feel we've got a lot of good metrics to share with committee tonight. So in total, we've had 600 pickups. So again, this is our 4-month review. If committee recalls, we kicked this off mid-November. And so since then, we've had 600 pickups with U-Link. When the pilot first started, when we were 2 months in, we sort of notice that our strongest demographic in terms of ridership were seniors. And then as we've looked in the latter months of the 4 months, we're really seeing the ridership become much more diverse in terms of users. Complementing the seniors, we've got adults and youth. And, you know, that's a really excellent result that we're seeing so far. And just share some more metrics here as in terms of gender using the ULink. So 67% are female riders and 33% are male riders. And again, this is kind of our demographics in terms of the pickup ages using the system. And I think what I really want committee to take away from this graph is how balanced this graph is in terms of our users and riders. You know, it's really showing that we're building some diverse riders with our ULink service. And this is a really good foundation if we're looking at a sustainable transit system for linking as we look, you know, past the pilot program. And that's really important, that you do want a diverse ridership. So this is a really excellent result that we're seeing so far. To share some of the metrics we're finding on our routes. So give committee some information on Route 1. So just real quickly, Route 1 is basically your southern Beamsville route. So again, the hub of our ULink pilot is the Fleming Center, and all routes start from the Fleming Center. So Route 1 Center heads south Beamsville up to Albright Manor and back down, so to speak. And you know, this particular slide here shows that we've got a pretty good distribution of use across our stops, which is a good, you know, it's a good representation that, you know, we've got some good stops that are you know, seeing pretty high usage, but fairly equal usage as well. So in Route 1, what we're seeing is the Idleheim Road stop, which is up at the Albright Manor. You know, probably the biggest ridership in Route 1. And as well, the Beamsville Medical Center is coming in at a close second. And that's really good news because, you know, we're actually giving riders mobility opportunity to get to the medical center. You know, we've heard stories, comments from riders has really, really been helpful. Otherwise, you know, they've got to pay for a cab, and that can be very difficult if you have to, you know, get to the medical center on a regular basis, and it can be fairly costly. So it's really provided a lot of opportunities in that regard. And the grocery store too, No Frills is another popular spot that we're seeing. Route 2, so Route 2 is basically north Beamsville. So again, we start at the Fleming Center. We use the Ontario Street spine, get out to the GO bus stop, and then we're coming back into Union Road to kind of try and service some of the industrial businesses in there, and then over to the Golden Horseshoe Estates trailer park. And on this particular graph, you'll notice on the left-hand side there, the large blue. I just wanted to point this out. So that's the Golden Horseshoe Estates trailer park, and they're a very large user of the system. And I really think it's, you know, it's a really great news story that we're seeing from this, because I really feel that this ULink, you know, pilot has allowed the Golden Horseshoe Estates residents to be much more connected to the community in terms of the urban area of Beamsville. You know, it's not in the urban area. You know, you're probably at least, I'd say, 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers from stores, and it's difficult, you know, for people to walk from that area. And it's rural roads. We don't have sidewalks, so I really think it's been a real success with helping serve the Golden Horseshoe Estates residents. And you can see here too, the GO bus stop is a popular stop as well on Route 2. We're seeing quite a bit of use at that one, and Sobeys is fairly active too. Route 3, so this is our again starting at the Fleming Center, and we basically use the King Street spine to get all the way out to Vineland and Jordan. And this particular route sees a lot of use. There's a lot of, we have a lot of activity on this route. When you look at the graph, you can see that the Heritage Village residents are using the service a lot. When I think that's a really good success result that we're seeing, and it's allowing those residents mobility opportunity to get out, do some shopping, get into Beansville, and it's so far been very successful. We're also seeing a lot of use at the Foodland stop that we have in Vineland. A lot of people are using that.
And sorry, just before Dave moves on, just Queen Manor as well, I just want to comment that, thank Councillor Timmers for really highlighting that in the planning stages, because building with a lot of occupancy, and they're an 18% ridership rate. So you can see, again, it's that connecting people to the community that maybe didn't have reliable transportation, similar to Golden Horseshoe. So really sort of targeting. So I just wanted to commend and thank you, because that was missed when we were in the planning stages. So highlighting that one area, you can see the big ridership. Sorry, Dave. Oh, it's me anyways. So there we go. So rider feedback themes. So, we get a lot of anecdotal feedback, and then we get a lot of really good critical feedback in terms of route planning and, where we should be considering as we sort of evolve this pilot. But like I said, overall, lots of positive feedback for the service. So, Dave mentioned earlier, the other thing we're seeing from riders is that it's really providing a good economic benefit. So a lot of people who before were taking cabs or specialized transit, either were relying on a fee for service, and they've been able to now get into our communities and actually shop and spend time in our downtown areas, which is really important. And then, obviously the independence piece. So Connie Groves wasn't able to be here tonight, and she wants to send her sincere apologies, because similar to our group from Heritage, she's a very big advocate of this service. Connie's being recognized tonight actually for her volunteerism in Thorold, so that's why she couldn't be here this evening. But she really wanted me to pass on that during this presentation, that she really feels this is huge for an independence perspective. And Connie said she was fine with me sharing her story, but Connie's always been sort of volunteering, but never been able to really be on site and be with her other volunteers. And ULink has opened up that opportunity for her to be actually at community support services on a daily basis now. So ULink's not only connecting her to the community, she's now giving back to the community because of that. And so it's a really nice opportunity for Connie and for others. And every time I see her out in the community, she's telling someone about ULink and the importance of riding it so that this becomes a sustainable service. So we have a few other good testimonials that are included on here. We also wanted to, Dave touched upon the Golden Horseshoe. And then, I think for those of us that have also been lifelong residents, I reflect and look at, when I was a youth, how nice this would have been for me to be able to connect more to the community in terms of employment. I rode my bike every day from Jordan to Beamsville to the fruit farm that I worked on, and, it wasn't always the safest. And so it's nice to see that youth have this opportunity now. So I know we're talking about a lot of residents in the community, but as a staff and a lifelong resident, this is a great opportunity for our community, and just has lots of potential. So some of the feedback we are receiving that we've put into the recommendations for this evening were that, requesting more stops and frequencies and connections to other towns and cities. Some of this obviously we know is limited based on sort of the threshold or abilities of the pilot, because this was a pilot and it was really intended, as we talked about the objectives at the beginning, to move people within Lincoln, but also we had 4 specific target audiences. So we had seniors, youth, those without reliable transportation, and migrant workers. So we weren't looking at this pilot for the broader community because, again, we wanted to sort of look, and as we were planning and looking at community assets, what would be the best. So we are seeing, though, from the ridership that is a need, and we know that. We're also seeing that we need more service in the Vineland area north of Heritage Village, so heading closer to the QEW down towards Victoria Shores. We've had some requests for services there. And obviously better connection times with GO. I mean, I think you've all heard that as counselors and as committee. And then frequent users become more familiar with routes, and new riders still support how to use the service. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the promotion and engagement section, so I won't expand on it here.
So based on rider feedback and the common themes, we've proposed some minor adjustments to the routes and stops. I think it's important to note, though, what we've done is because our pilot has a scope. We do have one bus. We only have one bus, and any changes we make to the pilot in terms of trying to change the route or adding stops, we want to be very disciplined and careful that we don't impact the actual service for the rider. So, we have to be careful that we don't make the route too long if we start changing the route and adding more stops, because we're trying to stay within an acceptable route time. If your route gets too long, that's not recommended, because then riders won't want to take it if the routes turn to be too long. So we had to keep those parameters in mind when looking at any changes. So all these changes, the changes that we're going to talk about tonight, they're fairly minor, but they're very important from what we've heard from the riders, and they won't impact any of our route times. So the first change that we're proposing is basically another stop, an additional stop in Route 1. We're suggesting that we add another stop on Hillside Drive up by the Albright Manor area. Again, we drive by this area right now anyway, so it's not going to cause any problems with route timing. And again, that's based on feedback from riders. There's been quite a bit of feedback related to, and it's quite interesting, there's actually employees at Albright Manor that live in Lincoln, and they would really like to take the bus to work. So in this particular case, if we can put a stop on Hillside Drive, basically somewhere in front of Albright Manor, it'll promote that for employees who work there to actually take the ULink bus to work. The reason is a lot of people who want to visit people in Albright Manor, they want to take the bus and have a stop in that location. And we also think at this particular location, we'll also give opportunity to some of the neighborhoods in fairly close proximity. We kind of use the rule of thumb of 400-meter radius, so we'll be able to give opportunity to people like in the Barry Drive, to the Ashby Drive area, Hickson Street, to use the bus stop. So that's one change that we're proposing for Route 1, is an additional stop there. In Route 2, we're proposing an additional stop in the Golden Horseshoe Estates trailer park there. If you can see on the screen there where the yellow arrow is, that's where we're proposing a stop. Currently, again, we've had a lot of success with the riders in this area, and a lot of interest to use the service. But we want to put another stop. You can see on John Street there, that'll give residents in that sort of area of Golden Horseshoe Estates more opportunity to get to a bus stop. There are people in there who do have mobility limitations, and they're finding it difficult to get all the way down to the stop that we currently have on John Street. So again, it's to better serve those residents who live in that area, and we're not concerned with route times. We're going by there anyways. So. And for the Route 3, we're proposing another stop basically across from No Frills in Beansville. And we heard this loud and clear from a number of riders. And it's really to provide a better customer service experience in terms of if you're in the No Frills area and sort of, I guess it would be east downtown Beansville, if you're shopping in that area. Currently, you have to walk up to Queen Manor to take the stop, or wait for the bus to come again, and it's quite a lag in time. So we're putting a stop across the street, so people now can just come across the street, get on the bus, and head back to Vineland. So that one's a really important one to improve that area for service.
Great, thanks, Steve. So promotion and engagement. So this slide, I've just, in terms of following up on the identity standards I sent out to council, I mean, this is a great example of how we've branded this service. So it has a very familiar look and feel in terms of promotion. So these are just some examples of some of what we would call the collateral or items that we're using to promote the service. But first, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about engagement, and then I'll go into the promotion and talk about next steps. So there was a significant amount of engagement done prior to the service, and I think, if you recall, I mentioned to council in the planning stages that it's hard to ask a community what they want for transit when they've never had transit. So really, it was about that route planning principles and mapping out those community assets. But now, moving forward over the next 4 months, now we've had the service for 4 months. People know what it's like to have a transit system, and so the engagement's going to look a little bit different, and as indicated in the report, we're going to be looking at customer satisfaction. We're going to be looking at the ridership analysis, so what encourages or discourages people from using the service. That can help inform what that next phase past the pilot, what transit would look like. The connectivity needs, right? So looking at GO and how can we integrate that a bit better, and then being a bit forward thinking around IMT, and Dave's Director Graham sits on that working group, so we've got that close linkage and thinking about where that needs to happen. And then affordability of service. If we're implement a fee post-pilot, what does that look like? How is it affordable for our community? And then going back to the original group of stakeholders who are really important in the planning stages, so the Heritage Group, Community Care of West Niagara Employment Help Center, Lincoln Medical Center, Albright, the Chamber, TVTA, and now we'll include Spark in that as well. So looking at, those specific stakeholders who had that target audience in those for this pilot. In terms of promotion, we've been doing ongoing promotion, always with a pilot. The challenge is we have to sustain it. And so you have to keep that enthusiasm and that momentum all the way through. So you use a whole bunch of different methods, varying opportunities. You try to leverage when, there's a good opportunity for people to use the service, if the weather's bad. If we know something's happening at the Fleming Center, we're always doing social media posts around, hey, if you want to come to that event at the Fleming Center, guess what? The ULinks hub is right there, and it's easy. Even right now, with the library being closed this week in Vineland for renovations, we said in the public service announcement, here's how you can get to Fleming Center using ULink if you were typically going to the Vineland branch. So we're always looking at different ways of doing promotion. So if tonight the recommendations within the report are approved, obviously we're going to need to get back out in the community and do a little bit more awareness around the service, and then plus all the new enhancements. The one thing I really did want to point out to this committee was we always said the public education piece would be, it sort of in alignment with the promotional piece, but it was actually a lot more significant than we expected. I mean, people were really having challenges understanding the schedule, how to use it. They've never used a transit system before. So in terms of thinking that, the next 4 months are really going to help focus on that public education piece. And now that we've got a bit more of a stable route, knowing that the route changes, even in speaking with, Mr. Byers tonight, who had a great idea around, let's do a seniors day. Can we just do a day where we actually invite seniors to come on the bus and we teach them how to read the schedule, how to use the routes? And I think it's a fantastic idea, and certainly within our ability to do that. So we can look at things as well for youth before the end of the school year, get out to BDSS and Blessed Trinity, encourage them to come out and ride the bus and see the routes and where they can go. So we've got some good opportunities moving forward. And I think that's it for promotion and engagement. Steve?
And we wanted to share with committee some of the quality improvements that we're continually adding to the ULink pilot project. Just share a couple. Inclement weather protocol, so hopefully we're done with that now, with snow at least. But we developed a good protocol just in case, we had to cancel the bus service, how that communication would occur internally and then externally. So we have that in place now. We had the service provider put GPS on the bus to at least allow staff to be able to view where the bus is. So if we ever have to share information, where is the bus? But I think more importantly, what we want to use that data for is to collect and trend the route timing, how it does vary depending on the ridership, the type of riders. So we're trying to monitor route timing and get a better understanding of that. A communication protocol we put in place with our service provider to ensure we have a clear line of communication on any issues that may arise. One thing that's been very effective is we've monthly we debrief with the bus drivers, and that I found that to be very valuable because the bus drivers, you know, they're on the bus every day. They you know, they hear from people, they see things, and we really value their input into any suggestions or monitoring different things that we should. So that's been really important. You know, just in general, the Go Bus Shelter, that's been really good. We've had a lot of positive feedback. We finally have a shelter, you know, and I think people are really appreciating that, and it really enhances ours because we stop there as well and drop off riders. And we developed a tracking system, and we're continuing to trend any feedback from riders of the public and making sure that that's staying, you know, relevant in what we're doing. So we have that put in place as well. So in terms of next steps, you know, we'll be implementing the new proposed stops that we talked about earlier, continued stakeholder consultation engagement strategy that Carrie spoke about. What we want to do summer months of June and August, or sorry, July and August, is we want to do a Saturday service, so to sort of test the waters and see how that goes over and what type of uptake and how successful that is. So you can expect that over the summer months. And again, we'll be reporting back to council in another 4 months with more information on how the whole pilot is going. So.
Okay. I have a question from Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. First off, Carrie and Dave, this is an excellent report. I really thought it was very well done. It was very clear. I love seeing all the percentages of where people are going and where the stops are. It's very clear. You know, the service has, in my mind, been very successful. Also, it's been through the winter months. So when the weather gets nice, I think we're going to see a huge increase in these riders. You know, when you look at the winter we had and the number of riders we've had and where they were going, I absolutely support the 3 new stops. I think they're very necessary, they're very thought out, and they're very much needed. And as well as the Saturday, I support that as well. I don't really have a question other than I was just really impressed with this report, and I'm really happy how it's been going. You kind of answered all my questions I had. Just around that public education piece, I think we're going to have to we need some, I don't know, maybe on-site routes posted, like some posters, like I'm thinking in, you know, the senior buildings for sure, like something that they can look at and see where it's going until they learn the routes. That's my only real comment. I'm really happy with the entire report and the way it's going. So thanks very much.
Councillor Brunei.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. I would echo Councillor Timmers' comments about the report. I think the next steps is where is critical. So, you know, in your last bullet points there, you talked about continued stakeholder consultation and engagement strategy. I guess my question is, or my comment is, I think that is going to dictate whether this whole pilot is going to be successful or not. You know, my gut feel after spending 2 years up in Grimsby and watching what they were wanting to do and getting the thing right to the finish line and then walking away from it was our impetus to continue with this. And, you know, we're so happy we did because we're providing mobility freedom for so many people. And, you know, my feeling is 600 stops, 600 pickups compared to what we heard from Pelham. I think we're in a good space. But the question is, where are we going? So I just spent the last 48 hours in Toronto at the Bike Summit, and I've had a blood transfusion. I drank the Kool-Aid for active transportation for the last 48 hours. So I'm on a bit of a low right now because I've been on a high for 2 days. But I can tell you if I heard one thing over the last 48 hours, is that every municipality across Ontario hates public PICs because you get 11 people or you get 3 people. And I heard something here about a seniors night, and those are the things that we heard over the last 2 days across Ontario in every municipality, small and big. Towns of 10,000 or cities as big as Toronto. They talked about having festivals like we experienced at Canada 150 celebrations where we had the U-Link bus there. And it's a cultural change. There's been no transit here in Lincoln. So, 600, I guess that's good. But what is the opportunity? Where is the ceiling? Where do we take this? Because I don't want to get to the point where we're having to make a decision as to whether we're going to cancel this or whether we're going to start charging or whether we're going to have to put advertising on the bus because we can't pay for it. I just want to keep growing this and growing this. And I think, I heard some things in the presentation about seniors nights and things like that, but I mean, that's all I heard for the last 2 days. You go to a Christmas tree lighting and you have people there filling out online surveys like we did at the Fleming Center one night about taxes, and 400 people participate and versus 11 people at a PIC. So I think it's about that engagement strategy and that stakeholder consultation and how we move this forward. But I really love the idea of, these events where we can have the U-Link there. St. Helens Church just launched a bingo night on Friday, April 13th. They're having 250 people come to the basement of that church every Friday night for bingo. Let's get the friggin' U-Link up there and park it in the parking lot. Because I honestly, my gut tells me, we have 23,000 people in this town, and as much as I love social media, I hate it. Because I read on social media people saying that U-Link was doomed from day one. What does that mean? Why is that person saying that? So my question is, out of 23,000 people that live in the community, how many people out of 23,000 people don't even know we've launched U-Link? And I think we probably don't want to know the answer to that question because I think it's probably a lot higher than we're wanting to know. So I think what's really important as we move this forward is that whole cultural shift that we do have transit now. It's a pilot, but we have transit. And, Dorothy Turcotte hit it in that editorial. She hit it out of the park where she said, I grew up in Hamilton where I could jump on a bus, and I haven't had that for the last 50 years of my life. And now Beamsville's got it, and she jumped in that bus, and she was surprised at what a pleasant experience it was. Pleasant experience. And there's people that have mobility freedom issues, and that's why they're taking it. But how can we raise the bar to another level to get those other people that can jump on that bus because they want a pleasant experience to do something? I talked to Jackie Giray for the last 2 days and Lisa Gallant. They have a list this long. I think we should be engaging them because they're dealing with 12 municipalities about having the U-Link involved for a photography night, and people that are into photography come on the bus and they go do some bird watching in Jordan Harbor for the day. Just a thought. And using U-Link because it's a pleasant experience. And then once the culture and the snowball continues to grow, then people start taking it for a transit. But they hear about it, they've talked to their neighbors and their friends, and it becomes a transit thing and a pleasant experience. So I love the report. But I really think, I just want to finish my rambling by saying the stakeholder consultation and the engagement strategy, I think, is whether we're going to be successful here as we look at this a year down the road. Thanks for the work.
More of a rant than a ramble. Nicely done. I have Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to follow the ramble by looking at this a little bit as well. First of all, I appreciate all the information and the way it's been presented. I find it fascinating, some of the areas where people are actually going to and where the centers of strength are with it. I'll be curious as you dig further into stats with this thing, what days of the week actually we're seeing this. I'm almost going to sound like the mayor with this, but you know, when it comes down to a lot of these things, there's metrics that are involved with things. And while I appreciate 600 people for the first 4 months is good, you extrapolate that over the year, you're still looking at a service that's costing approximately $60 per ride. So the thing is that we're going to have to push, as Councillor Bernier is saying, we're going to have to push it. We're going to have to show that you know, that there's active interest within the community to move forward. And you know, the bottom line is you know, making sure that that the community is completely supporting it, because it, like, and I have no idea what the cost is for other municipalities to do transit. I mean, we've never really talked about that, but you know, the reality is that transit has always been considered to be a bit of an expensive thing within a community. So as we look towards being more permanent and stuff like that, we are going to have to make sure that we do the ridership and that we do have the active support within the community. So anyway, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, it's a great report. There's no question about it. I look at transit as a service for those that need it. So we're going to decide whether or not that service is important to our community. And there's no point in lamenting part empty buses, because I've listened to all these arguments at the region, and the bottom line is that the people who are on the bus need it. And so we do it or we don't do it. And once we do it, we have to really do this push. I think that Councillor Bernier's comments was good Kool-Aid he had, because I think that this is what we need to do. There's got to be this forward push, and I doubt that it will ever end, because there will always be new groups out there that we need to capture. But I know lots of people that get on the bus just to go around town to see what's going on, and I think that's actually a really good idea. It's sort of like having a little tourism trip. And they meet people on the bus and they have some fun. It's probably better than staying at Albright Manor all afternoon. In fact, I know it's probably better. Lots of fun. So yes, let's just keep on pushing it, and I think it's amazing that you've been able to accomplish as much as you have, because this was a clear add-on. And thank goodness it wasn't on the end of your desks, because the outcome wouldn't have been as good. So I have to give you a lot of credit for the work that you've done to get this going. So I'm very happy about the youth focus, and we do need a big push on that, because my vision of all of this is that kids will be finding out, as you suggested, Carrie, what's going on, where you go to get there, and then, you know, that just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, that they can get out and see their friends and hang out and start having some fun and feel the support of the community. I'm wondering, however, about the quality of the bus. Are we happy with the size of it for the moment? Is it reliable? The decals look a little bit ragtag sometime. Are you reviewing that kind of thing with the bus owner as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Madam Mayor. The decals we're consistently reviewing. I think this winter has just been, I mean, even in terms of, just if I can comment also on the ridership, I mean, this has been an unusually cold and awful winter, and I think even myself, I didn't go out as much as I normally would, so let alone standing out at a bus stop. So I am really eager to see the next 4 months and hopefully some warmer weather, and to see where we go with that. So on the ridership side, and then yes, I think the decal's taken a bit of a beating this winter. So we'll be looking at updating that. And then in terms of reliability, I'll turn that over to Director Graham.
Through Mr. Chairman to Madam Mayor, we've been happy with the service provider. The bus has been reliable. I know there was maybe once, twice we had some problems. They had another vehicle, another bus there to make sure the service wasn't impacted. So to date, it's been a reliable bus in terms of providing the service. We haven't heard any feedback from the riders that there has been issues with the bus, so far it's been fine.
Okay, that's great. And Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask a question because I've heard from a few people that when they go to the grocery store, particularly in Vineland, that it was some of the residents in the Philip developed Kingsway, I guess it's called, in Jordan, that if they go into the grocery store, there's quite a wait. They get their groceries and then there's quite a wait. So I don't know what that wait is. What can you tell us about that? And is that improving, or do you think that has an impact on the ridership?
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair, Madam Mayor. It's about a 45-minute, so from the moment they get dropped off to the next moment they get picked up. And the rationale for that is that that's typical for transit systems. There is a bit of a delay. It has to be in terms of the route planning. The purpose of that, though, is that, there is Foodland, but there's a number of other business opportunities there. So, if there were other errands that people needed to do, 45 minutes wouldn't be enough, right? So we've got some people who say the wait's a bit too long, and then we have other people who say, well, if I miss that bus, then I have to wait another, because 45 minutes isn't long enough for me to get everything done. So it's a really hard balance in terms of that route planning and knowing. We went back to sort of those route principles in terms of planning, but we always are continuously looking at that, Madam Mayor, and certainly over the next 4 months, again, all of those critical pieces, asking those who are riding, and again, those who aren't riding, why they're not riding, and that could be one of the factors. But if you ride a system, say in the city of St. Catharines or Hamilton, it's common that there's that much of a gap between your stops.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I certainly can support this and look forward to the next 4 months. Thank you.
Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Chair McPherson. Just one quick question, an obvious one that I should have asked earlier, but since we've made the enhancement at the GO station with the shelter and the work that's taking place down there, have we done any tracking as to see whether stops down to the GO bus stop using from the U-Link riders has increased?
Through Mr. Chairman, I know we do communicate with Metrolinx as well, and they share some of their ridership in terms of using the GO bus. And the last metrics, they've seen an increase steadily. So, I mean, it's not significant. I think in the summer they were close to 30, and in the fall they were up around 37 riders a day using the GO bus. And so, I mean, I think it was obvious the stop has definitely enhanced that location for people using the bus stop. And I don't have all the details right at my fingertips as far as our service at the GO bus stop, but I know we did hear a lot of positive feedback once that shelter was there, because it was pretty out in the open, and people are really taking advantage of it now. So,
thank you.
So, excellent report. I commend the team for continually to reach back to the community and asking questions, because I think that's going to drive where we're going. Some of these numbers are very interesting and somewhat surprising. The split that we've got in, the ages that are taking the bus. I think we all had an idea of what it would be at the start, and it's certainly not that. And a very even split. The routes, I mean, if you look at the numbers, there's really no route that is weak, I don't think. I think that you did a very good job of selecting the initial routes. We do need more men and boys to be taking the bus. There's not enough of that, and maybe we need to give them a little kick and get them rolling. I'm going to jump on the promotion and drink some of the Kool-Aid. And that's, where I would be going is, we've got a great logo. I mean, the color combination and the look of that logo, and I'm wondering about that and the banner and getting those logos on store windows or in locations that it's on the door as you walk in. Albright Manor, you've got a U-Link sticker right on the window as you go into the location, and they're like, what is that? You know, and then they start asking the questions. Promotion within the paper, you know, I certainly agree that, you know, a lot of our community does go to the paper, and I did see a lot of ads at the start, and I wonder if maybe I haven't looked hard enough, but I haven't seen them lately, and I wonder if coming into spring and summer, if this is not the time to kick it back up again and look at promoting within the papers. I do like the idea of some kind of promotional event, and I thought of that, and you mentioned the Seniors Day or some kind of, I mean, the ride is free. I mean, we can't give it out any cheaper, but, you know, how do we encourage people to try it? You know, let's, you know, do something, you know, fun and, you know, get people to leave their car at home and just come for a ride. What else did I have? I think that might, yeah, just the, oh, I know what I had. And I did have a request about the schedules. And I know, you know, it's difficult when we are in kind of transition, but I'm wondering if we wouldn't consider printing a schedule with a date on it so that, you know, we have, okay, May 1st to whenever it is, September 1st, here's your schedule, because we're not going to change it in that period. I don't expect it's going to be coming back to council if we got to change it. So a hard copy, little pamphlet or little card, you know, out in the community that people could, you know, pick up at town hall, or we could have them at certain locations where it's a popular pickup location where they could just pick up a schedule. The only question I think I had, and maybe it's in the data, is do you track repeat customers, repeat riders? Just to see from that 600 rides, how many folks are we getting? You know, and it's just, I don't know if you have that.
It's a great suggestion.
Through Mr. Chairman, it's a great question and suggestion for us to move forward with. I don't believe we are at the moment, but I mean, we are meeting with the bus drivers regularly, so maybe we can develop something where we can, you know, they get to know the riders as well. So, I mean, I think it's something we can definitely build into our trending for sure. I think that's a good idea.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just you know, we're 4 months in, so we're still pretty early on. We did come winter and understand that, you know, our ridership probably fell off a little bit during the winter months. And, you know, I think that maybe just for the next 4 months, let's you know, restart or rejuvenate the program and maybe think about some of these, you know, promotional ideas to get that very beautiful, vibrant logo out there and get people to start asking, you know, what is this, if they don't know about it. Okay.
Sure. If I can comment, Councillor, sorry, I should have mentioned, I mean, I didn't get into a lot of the specific details around the engagement, but similar to the planning process, I mean, we didn't actually have one public information center. We went out to our audiences. So a number of you as councillors were actually at those. So we went out to our specific places and, you know, so that people didn't have to travel to us. So we'll be using that same approach moving forward. But I did want to mention that the bus will be at Touch a Truck. We'll be using that actually as our shuttle for people to get back and forth. So it's, but it was also intentional for people to get to know, and that's a much different audience that we'll get for Touch a Truck than we would typically using the service. So it'll be there. We'll also be, we're proposing it for the Doors Open. That'll be happening in the fall as well as to use, as well as actually we're hoping a cycling event as well with that. And Sorry, and in terms of hard copies, so we do, so actually Heritage can probably speak to it. I dropped off 250 hard copies that were out, which they have. We also did for Queen Manor and Albright Manor. So we'll be using that same approach, Councillor, so thank you for highlighting that. We do also have hard copies out at some of our businesses, but it might be a great idea, and again, thanks for highlighting it, that to refresh with them, maybe to have it a bit more visible. We do have hard copies at about 20 of our businesses that are close or adjacent to stops, as well as just in case people have questions about it. The one item that we need to relook at is we did try to put hard copy maps and schedules at our sites, but the weather was really troublesome. So now that the nice weather is out, we'll have to look at, but we haven't found that right product yet. We tried 2 different products that were economical, but we might need to look at investing in that a little bit more. So again, I wanted to thank you for that suggestion, because I think we'll relook that as well.
So maybe just one suggestion on promotion. So maybe the councillors should put it out there. Come and meet your councillor on the bus.
It's a great idea.
And we'll ride the bus for a day.
It's a great idea.
In our ward or whatever. Are we up for it? Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Bernay and seconded by Councillor Timmers that report PW 18-13 U-Link Transit Pilot Quarterly Update Report be received for information, and that Council of the Whole Economic Development Committee recommend that Council approve the following changes to the U-Link route in order to improve service for residents. Approve the implementation of 3 additional stops at Hillside Drive, Sand Road, and King Street, Beamsville, to provide improved service. Approve a summer service Saturday route between the months of July and August 2000. And that committee approve the additional budget costs of $6,500 for the additional 3 stops that will be funded through 2018 approved budget cost savings. Your pleasure on the motion. That motion is carried. So thank you, folks, for coming out tonight. You're welcome to stay if you'd like, but what did I have? Where did I put it? Okay, so next up in our reports is AD 18-06 Economic Development Strategy Interim Report. Mr. Deanny, sir, it's all yours.
Good evening, committee, and thank you for having me this evening here. So this is a milestone in our economic development strategy. So further to the report that was presented this evening, we are at a milestone event in terms of our interim report has been tabled. So just quickly before I go through the presentation, the interim report is really a resource document for the development of our final economic development strategy, which will be tabled in June. So I know there was a couple questions in terms of not seeing some recommendations in there, but that really doesn't come until the final phase of our strategy. So just to quickly go through here, the phases, as previously mentioned, the phases to complete our economic development strategy. So phase 1 being the situational analysis, phase 2 being the stakeholder consultations, which encapsulates the interim report, and then of course phase 3, the building of our economic development strategy. And that, as I had mentioned, will be completed using phases 1 and 2, which are highlighted in our interim report this evening. So in terms of the interim report, and I will go quickly through this presentation this evening, as you saw in the report, it is a 55-page document. So what I've tried to do this evening is just pull a few highlighted numbers that I wanted to share with Council this evening, and then open this up for some questions. So as previously mentioned, this is a high-level resource document that really encapsulates phases 1 and 2 of the overall project, that being the situational analysis and the stakeholder consultations. So the report does include a demographic analysis and labor force analysis, an economic base and sector analysis, a high-level investment readiness assessment, stakeholder consultations overview, as well as a SWOT analysis. So in terms of one of the first numbers that I did want to mention, and as you can see here, Lincoln does account for about 5% of the population in Niagara, and we are growing. So between the years 2011 and 2016, we did see a population growth of about 5.8%. Lincoln is forecasted to reach a population level of about 28,000 by 2031 and a population of 31,590 by 2041. In terms of age distributions, you can see a variety of age cohorts here, but I did want to sort of highlight that 21% of our population is 65 years or older, and our median age is 44.5 years old. In terms of Lincoln does have a percentage of children aged between 0 to 14 years of age, or about 17.1%, and this does suggest that our community is quite attracted to families with young children. Now, in terms of one other highlight item that I did want to highlight, so from a from a millennial standpoint, those born between the ages of 1981 and 2001, we do have a slightly lower percentage on that front, and of course that does indicate individuals within this age group tend to be moving to the bigger cities, and I think this goes towards part of the reason why we're talking about youth engagement and youth attraction in our community. With Spark Niagara and of course our economic development strategy, part of that is trying to figure out how we can keep that cohort here in Lincoln to help grow our community that way. One other table that I did want to highlight this evening was our labor force by sector. Now, I'm not going to go in terms of line by line here, but there are some numbers I wanted to highlight. But overall, Lincoln's resident labor force is about 12,490 individuals. So as you can see here, notably higher portion of Lincoln labor force in 2016 compared to that of Ontario. And that was within, obviously, the agricultural and manufacturing sector. So if you look at the one table here, about 6.5% of individuals work in the agricultural sector here in Lincoln, which is considerably higher to the Niagara percentage as well as the Ontario percentage. And the same goes for the manufacturing sector as well. And that is basically about 13.1% of our workforce population work in the manufacturing sector, compared to the 9.5 in the Niagara region and 9.8 in the Ontario percentage. So we're outperforming both regionally and provincially in those two categories, which is a great story. In terms of commuting flows, this basically, and I won't go into the numbers here in detail, but really what this shows is a high degree of labor inflows and outflows within Lincoln. And basically what this means is, as you can see, we are part of a larger economy here in the Niagara region, as well as Hamilton and the Golden Horseshoe. So we do have a high number of individuals that both work in Lincoln, but also work outside of Lincoln. But there's two stories on that front as well. We do have a higher number of individuals from Hamilton and St. Catharines coming into our community. So, I mean, the big thing to take away from here is it just really does show that we are part of a larger economy here and we're not isolated. So in terms of the key takeaways for the interim report, Lincoln does have a higher population growth between 2011 and 2016, and that's at 5.8% compared to Niagara's 3.8 and Ontario 4.6. So then again, we are higher than both the regional and the provincial average. So like Niagara, in general, Lincoln does have an older population compared to Ontario, with a median age in 2016 being 44.5 years, which is 3.2 years higher than the Ontario median age in that year. In addition, the jobs to labor force ratio in Lincoln is about 0.91, which is slightly below the optimal terms of having enough jobs for the size of the labor force. However, we are quite close to that provincial average, so it's not really a negative story to tell on that front. Compared to Ontario, we do have a higher portion of Lincoln resident labor force working in the agricultural and manufacturing sectors. And there is, as I mentioned previously, a high degree of labor inflows and outflows, showcasing that Lincoln is really part of a larger economy in the area. So I did want to move on to the economic base analysis of the interim report. And as you saw in the larger document, Lincoln did see an increase of about 902 jobs between 2012 and 2017, and that accounts to about an 8% growth, and so we're 6th overall in terms of job creation in the Niagara region. So it's a good story to tell for not only for Lincoln, but the region itself. For the most part, minus the 2 municipalities at the bottom, there is overall job growth throughout the region. So in terms of the actual number of jobs we have per sector, I do just want to mention the top 4 sectors that we do have in terms of manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, and mining and quarrying. So we do have, in terms of an overall percentage of jobs within the Niagara region, we do have quite a number in those 4 categories. Obviously, as you can see on the far right-hand column, we do have about 27% of all agricultural jobs in the Niagara region are located here in Lincoln. In addition, if you drop down to closer to the bottom, we have about 35% on the mining quarrying side, just showcasing the importance of those 2 sectors. In addition, obviously, number 1 being manufacturing at the top. In terms of actual job growth by sector that we did see in 2012 to 2017, once again, we see our top sectors at the top. Our most important sectors at the top being the manufacturing, accommodation, food services, and the administrative services as well. So you do see percent growth in those sectors. But I do want to highlight quickly just in terms of arts and entertainment and recreation, as well as food services and accommodation, which really kind of barrels down to our tourism sector. We did see about 351 jobs created between those time periods in that sector alone, which does showcase the importance of that sector. The reason that you don't see an actual tourism number here is Statistics Canada and OMAFRA through their MC data don't actually barrel down into just a tourism number. So you do need to kind of bring together a few different categories to come up with that overall tourism sector. But I am working with the Niagara Workforce Planning Board, being on the research committee, to help barrel down to that number. So that's one thing that we are looking at. Now, in terms of the next table, we do have basically part of the industry segments with highest location quotients in Lincoln. And really a location quotient is a number of 1 is on par with the provincial average. Anything below that would be below the provincial average. Anything above that is higher than the provincial average. So I just really wanted to highlight the 3 top sectors here in terms of farm production or agriculture. If you look at that location, 0.36, actually means we're 44% higher than the provincial average in terms of farm and agricultural production. In addition, beverage manufacturing, which of course is our wine, beer, and liquor manufacturing, we're 25% higher than the provincial average. In addition to railroads, manufacturing, as well as, and I think there's one further down the list, but no, those are the top ones that I wanted to mention. So overall, I mean, everything on this list is higher than the provincial average, which really goes to showcase the healthiness of our economy here, as well as the importance of these individual industrial segments here. Now, in terms of the tourism sector, so we do identify a bunch of different categories here that could, as I mentioned, account for our tourism sector. And the overall numbers that I really wanted to identify here, of course, being, I mean, they're all seeing growth for the most part, but percent change in terms of independent artists, writers and performers, performing arts companies, traveler accommodations, and other amusements, as well as full-service restaurants, and limited seating or service eating places. So you are seeing percent growth in this sector, which does accumulate to that 351 jobs, but this just does break it down a little bit further. So in terms of the key takeaways for the economic base analysis, so as I previously mentioned, Lincoln is 6th largest community in Niagara as measured by job numbers of about 12,225 jobs in 2017, which represents, as I mentioned, a job growth of about 902 jobs or 8%. Agriculture is a very important sector in the Lincoln economy, and several subsectors of that overall cluster showcases an important sector within Lincoln. So within Niagara, Lincoln does account for over 30% of gross farm receipts and 23% of the total farm capital. In addition, Lincoln is the dominant sector for the greenhouse industry, accounting for about 40% of the total area of Niagara greenhouses throughout the region. In addition, there has been growth in the number of farming jobs in Lincoln compared to decreases at both the regional and provincial levels. So it is estimated that the number of farming jobs in Lincoln increased by about 9.2% between 2012 and 2017, whereas in the region and Ontario you saw a drop of about 3.9% and 17% respectively over that time period. In addition, Lincoln's tourism sector is significant and growing, as we saw by some of those numbers. In addition, Lincoln's manufacturing sector as an industry concentration is above the provincial average with a location quotient of 1.68. And then most significant segment of that being beverage manufacturing with about 602 jobs. So part of what we're doing in the interim report and the final report as well is we are benchmarking ourselves with some different municipalities. So as you can see a list here in terms of Fort Erie, Grimsby, Pelham, Essex, Leamington, Kingsville, and Niagara-on-the-Lake, as well as Prince Edward County. And according to the economic base analysis, we are outperforming these sectors or these different municipalities according to our economy. So the overall number of jobs in Lincoln are projected to increase, albeit at a slower pace from 2017 to 2022 compared to 2012 to 2017. Part of that is, as we saw in our previous presentation this evening, when you come outside of a recession, you actually see a larger amount of jobs created. But then when the economy starts to hit its stride, you see smaller jobs created, but you still are going to see an increase overall during that time period. A growth of 756 jobs is projected over this period, with the highest increases being in the healthcare and social assistance sector, manufacturing, accommodations, and food services. And overall, here in Lincoln, we do have 898 locations of enterprises, so businesses as of December 2016. So now moving on to our next portion of the interim report. So I did want to highlight in terms of our stakeholder consultations and the online survey. So as you know, the survey was open from February 15th to March 26th, and a total of 314 people filled out this survey. 80% of respondents were from Lincoln residents, including 117 who identified themselves as either working or operating a business here in town. So in terms of responses, the top 5 economic strengths that were mentioned by respondents include highway accessibility, proximity to the GTA, our agricultural lands, tourism, and of course our location within Niagara. In terms of the top five economic weaknesses, so that were identified by respondents, public transportation, lack of suitable employment opportunities, energy costs, labor availability, and lack of development incentives. So of course, what they mentioned in terms of where we should focus our efforts in terms of the economic development strategy, which I had mentioned previously, being business expansion and retention, support for entrepreneurship, promotion of tourism, supporting our business or supporting business innovation, and supporting/expanding our agricultural sector. And it is important to note that we've already started working on a number of these in terms of Spark Niagara and other elements that we've been talking about. In terms of respondents, what will drive growth in our economy? So wineries, agriculture, restaurants, accommodations, and manufacturing. So barrowing down to basically tourism, agriculture, and manufacturing. So, I mean, what does this all mean? Overall, Lincoln has a healthy economy. We have seen a healthy level of job increases since 2012, being about 902 new jobs. We do have a fairly diversified economy, being agriculture, horticulture, our manufacturing sector, tourism, and healthcare. Our population is growing, so 5.8% since 2011, and overall our economic indicators are pointing for an upward trajectory in terms of our economy. So in terms of next steps, of course, I had mentioned at the beginning, we're really going to be using this data in the interim report to identify the elements of our economy where we can see the most growth, of course, while maintaining the success that we've had over the past 5 years. The final report and action plan will be completed by June and will be presented at the next committee, the whole Economic Development Committee. And the final report and action plan will be a guiding document that really helps outline the concrete steps and activities that we will be undertaking to help grow our economy. So it'll really be an action guide that will showcase what we need to do, with the work really being on the front end of that 5 years, the 1 to 3 years. The other 2 seeing sort of return on our investments, and of course we do a new economic development strategy to build off of the successes that we've had. So further than that, I do open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Deanne. I have Councillor Foster.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. This is a really good report, and I'm reading through a variety of things with the stats and stuff. Again, I love stats. You've outlined a whole lot of areas that when we start drilling down into them, it's going to be fascinating to work with them in the future. And I know within your job role as to what you're doing, you're going to be able to weed out some really neat stuff. Just a couple of things. I do find it interesting with our municipality. It hasn't really changed a lot over the last 15 to 20 years when it comes to the population breakdown. One of the things that I had seen early on in my original council days was the fact that we had a large number in that youth area and a large number in the more aging side of things, which means fascinating things for us when it comes to services and things and where we're going to with our economic development. The 880 cities methodology or thinking processes, we're almost a poster child to be looking at, how we're going to make our municipality run and behave for people in the future, looking down the line with that. So the numbers are good. They show what's happening really well. The other thing out of all of the stats that I really like to see too is that we are seeing consistent job growth within the municipality, and I think that's something that maybe isn't completely understood within the community. We've always been seen as being a bedroom community to elsewhere, and the stats show that yes, we do have a lot of people going. I mean, I work in Oakville during the day, but the thing is that there is a lot of employment here, and there appears to be growing employment. So again, I think this is going to make some really good stuff for us to focus in and work on into the future, because we can say this is a place where people are really wanting to come and to do what it is that they're doing. So I just applaud you on the work that you've done in this area, and I'm thinking I think this is giving us a solid base to help make decisions in the future. So, and I'm looking forward to your next report.
Thank you for your comment, Chair. Through you, thank you for your comments, Councillor. I mean, it is really a good story that we can tell here in terms of the numbers that we have. I mean, like you, I do really enjoy the numbers, and this 55-page document definitely had a lot of them, and I was furiously highlighting. So I had to really pick and choose what to talk about this evening. But I mean, you're right. There is a good story to tell. Our numbers are growing. We do have a good inflow and outflow of jobs, which showcases that we're part of a larger economy. But I mean, in terms of the region, we are 6th overall in job creation, and age cohorts tend to follow the jobs, but also tend to follow, from generation to generation, you usually get the same breakouts in terms of age cohorts. There's things that you can do to sort of tweak those, but you're right. We have a good story to tell here, and when it comes to the final strategy, we look forward to sort of presenting that to our community, working, of course, with our colleagues in communications and stuff. So, thank you. Madam Mayor.
Well, I just want to thank Paul, and I certainly agree with everything that Councillor Foster had to say. It's just so exciting to have this basic information available to us now. We can really start grinding away at it and seeing where we can use this to make decisions from. And it was so frustrating when you never had information. And I showed Paul information that I have now from the region on agriculture. I've got about 30 pages just on agriculture. So there's data now that we could never have hoped to have. So it's really good that this is what you're paying attention to right now. I can hardly wait till June. It's good stuff. Thanks.
And one item, and I don't want to get in the weeds on all of these numbers, but I just see this. Lincoln is forecast to reach a population level of 28,000 by 2031, and with what we know is going to happen in 3 major developments, I would say that we're going to probably exceed that 31,590 by 2031. So maybe something to consider, especially as we start thinking about that labor force ratio and the downward pressure on that labor force ratio as we are growing in residential, as opposed to jobs. But yeah, overall, a lot of numbers, and Paul and I have talked about this a lot, so, he knows where I'm at on this, and I totally agree with Mayor Easton that, it just gives us that foundational information that, we just have not had to this point, and, it really gives us, the picture of where we are today, and it's so important in making decisions in investing in economic development about where we're going. So I think that's all I had. Maybe on the last page of your presentation, I think the question I have in my mind, you speak about use the data in the interim report to identify the elements of our economy where we can see the most growth while maintaining the success that we have had over the last 5 years. And I'm wondering how the consultants will help us to get focused with all of these numbers, and is there some magic formula, or is there, things that those of us that are not tuned into economic numbers, how we use them to the best of our ability to come up with that strategy. Have you got any comments around that?
Yes, thank you for the question. So, I think their goal, and I speak about our consultants, and my goal as well, is really to look at, what we have, and this is really what the interim report is, look at what we have and where we can go. So, what, is there a magic formula? I don't think so, but it's really about looking at the numbers, listening to what our stakeholders have talked about, and then really identify where our successes or where we can most grow the economy. And I think, for example, you look at where we're currently growing jobs, and really figure out how we can help those businesses succeed and grow some more. I've said it before that, most of the jobs that we will see in terms of growth come from our existing businesses. So how do we identify them and help them grow and flourish? So, there's no magic formula, but, it's really identifying what we have, which is what this has done, and then identify where we can grow and move forward. So, we're obviously looking at tourism, we're looking at supporting our manufacturing sector, and of course, agriculture as well.
And I was interested in, some of the information with regards to investment readiness and kind of the boxes that you need to check along the way. And obviously we're just getting out of the gate. We're babies at this right now, and we've got much to do. But it's interesting to see or hear what it is an economically developed, focused community or city has when you look at investment readiness. So some interesting things to come. So great work. This is, I think Mayor Easton coined the lightning speed. And it's great to be here so quickly and, to be able to develop the strategy before the end of this term is very exciting. So nice work.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
I could. Mr. Chairman, somewhere in this document, when I first heard it, I took a little bit of exception to it, and I thought, well, what do you mean? We're working really hard, and but anyway, it was a comment about us, moving very fast, but maybe we're not being as creative as we could be. Do you remember that in here? I can't find it now, but I know it's in here. I've been looking for the last 3 minutes and can't find it.
Sorry, through you, Chair. No, apologize, Mayor. I don't remember that comment specifically. Okay. It was in my report. It was in the interim report. Same report.
Well, it's in the interim report because it was a comment that actually came from the consultant. Can't find it. We're not going to worry about it tonight, but it'll be interesting to hear what the consultants have in mind around that. I thought it was a good comment. I thought that it was one that we would want to learn a little bit more about, because definitely we're going to have to be very creative when it comes to how we go forward. We've had here we are, no culture of local innovation for adapting or developing technology for a broader scale. Content to be fast followers and adopt others' technology than being leading edge for local and global needs. It's on page 118 or 45 at the top. I just wondered if you had any idea what they were really thinking about there. Maybe the spark will help us pull up our socks here a little bit.
Yes, Chair, through you. So part of this, and I didn't get into the presentation, this is part of the SWOT analysis that they did. So what they've really identified are, what are our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And some of those weaknesses really are, the goal is to turn those into opportunities and things that we can focus on. So, I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds on that one sort of comment, but really it's figuring out how we can, look at what, weaknesses we do have, focus on those, obviously, and turn those into opportunities.
I'm sure that I didn't quite understand exactly what he meant, but we can look into that later. It's not something for tonight. It's
and I think you're right. The answer to that is, when they say no local culture of innovation for adaptive developing technologies, really the answer is Spark Niagara, but as well as some of the business we have in terms of extreme technologies. And, if technology innovation can solve some of the issues that our companies are experiencing, that's what we need to do, and we have to be on the leading edge of that.
Right. Thanks very much for that, Mr. Chairman.
So, Mr. Gianni, for next steps, the council input is done, I'm assuming, and that we're not looking to have another roundtable with the consultants. It's the final report will come, and at that point, we decide what it is we want to focus on, or do they? Just so I have an idea of what should we expect out of the report? Is that them coming to us and saying, here's your economic development strategy, or do we have more input?
So thank you for the question. So what happens next is really going off and writing and developing that strategy. In terms of further council input, we're not looking at having another roundtable discussion, but of course, you're more than welcome to help provide some additional input if something comes up between now and June. What's going to happen is staff will see a draft report in June at some point, probably the early June. We'll have some comments and feedback on it. And then the consultants will come back and present a final report to council. We adopt and then move forward to actioning those items that they talk about. Just to obviously highlight, I've said in conversations between you and I, the strategy and action plan is not going to solve all our problems overnight. Really, it's concrete steps that we need to take to help improve our economy. So it does mean a lot of work. It does mean a lot of investment. But it's obviously something that both myself and my colleagues and individuals around the horseshoe are willing to take.
Gets us focused, and then we have decisions to make. Thank you. So I have a motion moved by Mayor Easton and seconded by Councillor Foster that report AD 18-06 regarding the Economic Development Strategy interim report be received for information. Your pleasure on the motion. That is carried. Yes.
Before we go any further with the agenda this evening, there was just a brief discussion amongst the councillors on this side, and there's a bit of disappointment that we do not have more councillors here this evening for the session that we were to deal with in closed. Would it be appropriate, I think the three of us are in agreement to defer that until the closed session until the next council meeting. And the reason is simply this, really we should have all members of council here in discussing that particular issue. So, Madam Mayor, through you to the Madam Mayor, do you have any objection to that?
On principle, I do, because I think that people knew absolutely, they had plenty of notice that this was going to happen, but from a practical perspective, it is better for all of us to be in attendance. And we need to understand where we're exactly what we're going to be doing on the process. I think it's very difficult for the CAO. This has been going on for quite a long time now. I mean, there's no surprises here. It's really productive conversation we're going to have. So, yes, I agree. It's reasonable.
Yeah, I would agree. It makes sense. I mean, 4 of us that are here are on the committee, so we know what the results are. But I would suggest that we move it to a near future council meeting or some kind of meeting. I don't know if we need a motion for that or not, but to move it through, because I think it is unfair to Mike that we are continuing to delay this.
Council meeting is on May 7th.
May 7th?
Or do you want to go to a committee of the whole again?
That's another month.
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering also what the rest of the group would, rest of the councillors would think. This discussion tonight would only have been about half an hour to no more than 40 minutes. It was really just to bring people all up to speed. So maybe what we can do is really discipline ourselves, have it for a half an hour, and then have Mr. Krikopoulos come in, and we'll do it all in one evening. And we should do it. I would like to see it done absolutely as soon as we possibly can. And if there are people that are not available, be that as it may, but I don't think anybody will be on vacation.
Do we need a motion to move or just to defer? Just to defer?
Okay, so I move a motion to defer item 11A.
Do we have a seconder on that?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Thanks very
And
much.
your pleasure. Deferred. Okay.
And if there's anybody that isn't on the committee that has any questions at all, just, come and see me and I'll just bring you up to speed. Thanks very much.
No, good point. Good point, Rob. Okay, so we have councillor inquiries. Are there any councillor inquiries this evening? We're all tired, seeing none. Any notices of motion? Don't imagine there are. Seeing none. Any announcements tonight? Seeing none. We now have no closed session, so at 9:35, we are adjourned. Thank you to the staff.